what are the centers in human design? This is part 2 because I talked so much when I was filming this that I figured I should break it into 2 pieces. So let's dive into the second half, the heart center. This is also sometimes called the will or the ego. It is one of our motors. It's a center for willpower, ego, things of value, and that includes material things as well as money. The defined heart is really about willpower. Even though it's a motor, it is not a source of sustainable energy at all, and it really needs to work in terms of like spurts and rest. So if you have this defined, you need rest. Like you need rest. We all need rest, but you really need rest. Most people have this center open. So when you have willpower, you can actually push a little bit more than others, and that's not always a good thing. It's energy that can last for a short period of time, but it's not something you want to be consistently relying on. And it's really important when you have this defined that you take like real rest, not fake rest in the sense that like, oh, I'm gonna like clean my apartment or I'm gonna read a self-help book. That's not rest, okay? You need to figure out what is actually restful for you and that re-energizes you and then makes you feel properly rested, because it can be easy with this to push and push and push and push and just get so burnt out, and I don't want that for you. The defined will center or heart center also has a theme of empowering people, and it can be a center that other people project things onto, especially promises. So you might mention like, yeah, that would be really cool if we, did that thing, and then a few months later they're like, where are you? I thought you said we were going to this thing together. And you're like, what? No, I just, mentioned that maybe it would be a cool thing to do. So be careful when you're speaking and be clear about things that you are promising versus things that are just sort of like ideas or like might be cool to do. In the low expression of the will center, there definitely is space for ego and really being sort of selfish and making things about you. And that's not always a terrible thing. Sometimes there's, necessity for being selfish and taking care of yourself. The high expression is really about surrendering and just like surrendering to source. The open heart is here to be wise about what is truly valuable in life. The biggest challenge usually for this center is questioning their own value and feeling like they have to prove something. Be mindful of promises that you're making. Be mindful of commitments. Are you doing this because you're trying to prove your value or you're trying to prove something to someone? And like with any open center, you can take in the energy here and amplify it. So when someone has willpower and you're around them, you can take in that energy and make it bigger. So you can push even harder for a short period of time. It's not sustainable for you, and you have to make sure that when you're out of that energy, you take time to rest. Another thing I like to note here is that rest and worthiness are associated, right? Especially in our Western society, we think that we have to be productive. Being productive is better, and resting is bad or lazy or whatever. So that's really not the case. You need to rest. If you think of a Tour de France cyclist, they can't just do the entire race. Like no one thinks they're lazy for sleeping at night, right? Or for taking a break. We know that it's not possible for them to continue to go all day, all night, all the time. And it's the same with us, but we somehow get it twisted and think that we just need to like fill every hour of every day with things to do so we can be productive, because when we're productive, we're valuable. That's not true. We're valuable, period. We have value, period. That's it. Be productive when you want to be productive and when it's right for your strategy and authority, and then rest when you need the rest. Okay, we passed the halfway mark. We are on to the emotional solar plexus. So this is the center for emotions. It's also art, creativity, poetry, music, seduction, war, contracts, agreements. Karen Curry, who's an incredible human design teacher, says that this is the energy that makes us human. I like to think it would be super cute if animals were like making poetry and stuff, but they don't have this center. So that's something that makes us human. If you have this center defined, you are emotional. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. The emotional solar plexus works in waves. So there are 3 types of waves. I'll probably make a video about this in the future, going into detail about what they are. But essentially, you can imagine a wave goes up and down, as do your emotions. So we tend to be in a society, again, especially in the West, of wanting to be happy, right? Happiness is prized. That's what our goal is. We're not supposed to feel sad. If we are, we should be medicated or something because something's wrong with us. And that's really not the case here. You are meant to feel a wide range of emotions, and you really have the gift of depth of emotion. So it's like you can feel the lows and you can feel the highs, and that's okay. Depending on what wave you have, some cycles of emotion can feel really intense and some are not as noticeable. So it just depends on how it plays out in your chart. Regardless, it really is important when you have the emotional center to learn to use your emotions correctly. So when you have the emotional energy, because this is one of the motors, that you use that energy. You create, you dance, you sing, you, I don't know, maybe design spaceships, right? But it's about using the emotional energy in a way that allows you to express it. And when you're feeling low on your wave, and maybe you're feeling kind of like depressed or angry or melancholic or whatever, figure out how to safely express that energy. So when you allow yourself to actually express that energy, you'll be pretty surprised how quickly you actually move through it. Whereas if you feel the energy and you're like, oh no, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to feel depressed, I don't want to feel whatever, and like resist it and push against it, it like stays longer and it gets kind of worse. Whereas if you allow yourself to express the energy, maybe you need to have a good cry, maybe you need to like go one of those rage rooms. Have you heard of those things where it's like you put on like a safety suit and just like smash a bunch of stuff safely? Figuring out safe ways that are healthy for you to express your emotions are really important, because then it helps you to move through your wave. And Ra Uru Hu, who's the founder of Human Design, says that when you have the emotional solar plexus, there is no truth in the now. So it really is about riding out the wave. I will also mention, I'm doing another video about this, but if you have this defined, it is your authority. So again, there is no truth in the now. It's about learning to ride out your wave, learning to know where you're at on the wave. So being able to kind of identify if you're like really excited and frantic and like, oh my God, versus like, oh, everything's wrong, nothing's gonna work. Like, you don't wanna make decisions from either of those places, right? It's about getting the high, getting the low, and then coming to sort of a more even place, and that's where you can make good decisions from. That's where there is truth for you. Again, you are meant to experience a full range of emotions. It's not a bad thing, but it is helpful to learn how to process the emotions and process them responsibly so that you can live your best life, but so the other people around you can also kind of be happier and easier to be around, or you're easier, I guess, to be around, versus, you know, being super happy one minute and then like angry and exploding the next minute. It's really about learning how to use your emotions in the best way for you. When you have this center open, you truly are empathic. You can feel other people's emotions. And so it's important for you to learn the difference between experiencing an emotion and like taking it on. My teacher uses the example that I really like of a window screen. So if you can imagine a window screen and wind, the wind is the emotion, and if you have the center open, you are the screen. So the wind blows through the screen, but the screen is not the wind. It can feel the wind, but it is not the wind. So just like you can feel emotions, they are not your emotions. There's a few different ways this tends to show up for people. Either they become sort of people pleasers because they don't want to feel the emotions, they don't want to upset people, they don't want them to be angry. They become people fixers because they can feel the bad emotions and they're trying to like fix everything and manage everything for that person. Or if they grew up around a lot of this energy, sometimes they can kind of be drama addicts because they're used to the crazy emotional energy. So they'll sort of like poke the bear or stir the pot so that they can get that reaction that they want and that emotional energy that they want that they don't create themselves. Generally, when the center is open, the impulse is just to avoid it all. People please, get away. They don't want to like feel the anger or the disappointment or whatever kind of negative feelings. They just like want things to be, you know, even and good and everyone's fine. Because of this, there can be a tendency to not speak your truth or to avoid confrontation. So notice if you're doing that and learn to be comfortable with other people's emotions. It's not your job to manage them. It's not your job to make them happy. It's okay if other people are upset around you. It's, again, not your job to do that. So notice where you're holding back from speaking your truth and start practicing. The other thing I like to mention when you have the center open, especially if you're in some sort of a partnership, relationship, family, whatever, with someone who has this defined, is that when emotions start climbing, to take physical space. Give yourself 15 minutes, go for a walk, get out of that emotional energy and give it time to like dissipate and calm down. Because when you're having some sort of a discussion or an argument and things are getting heated, there's not gonna be a good resolution there. So let the person know, hey, I feel like things are getting a little bit heated, or I feel like I just need to step out and like take a minute. It's like, I'm just gonna go for a walk. I'll be back in 15 minutes. You know, if it's a partner or something, like, I love you, this is a really important conversation to me, but I just need to like take a break and I'll be back in 15 minutes, right? And so it can be really helpful to have a conversation with these emotional people in your life to kind of understand where the boundaries are with that. And if you're like, oh my God, Katie, I'm so emotional, what are you talking about? Like I said, this is an open center, so you take in energy and amplify it. So it might actually seem like you are more emotional than the emotionally defined people in your life. But generally, when you don't have anyone around you and you've let the emotional energy sort of subside, you're kind of just like even and cool and chill. The spleen is an awareness center. It's really your center for instinct and survival. It's also about intuition, fear, and health. The spleen is very time specific. So if you think about instincts, if there's something that's dangerous and it's like immediate, you run, right? Fight, flight, freeze. You don't spend time riding out the wave like you do with the emotions. It's instant, it's immediate. When you have a defined spleen, you are meant to be spontaneous. You are also highly intuitive and you can tap into those instincts, which is how you can rely on the spontaneity. I will make a caveat though, if you have a defined spleen and you also have the emotional solar plexus defined, you are meant to use that as your authority, so you're not going to be as spontaneous as your spleen may want you to be. The defined spleen is really meant to pay attention to your senses, so get to know them and get to know sort of how they speak to you. You know, maybe your intuition comes through your hearing, like maybe you hear things or you just get a feeling, or you kind of like smell when something's off, or things like don't sound right, or even you get like a bad taste in your mouth. Pay attention to your senses because they will let you know when something is off. Wrong environments for the defined spleen can really lead to sickness and low energy. And there can be a tendency for fear because your survival mechanism is just always on, right? And humans, they say that's how we survive so well, is because we're so good at scanning everything for potential danger or like negativity or problems. And we're actually in the process of moving out of that center right now. So where we used to survive and move away from things that were bad, we're now moving towards the solar plexus and things that feel good. Notice where this center is acting up in your life. Something that used to show up for me, and I feel like this sounds a little bit nuts when I talk about it, when I used to walk down the street, and this was a couple years ago, I would like always be sort of on high alert. Like if this person did this thing, then I would do that. Or if that person did that thing, then I would do this. And it was very much the spleen in terms of scanning my environment and checking to see how I would keep myself safe, how I would survive. But really, when I'm walking down the streets of Toronto, that's not something I need to worry about. And so it's more about letting that go, letting the fear go, knowing that I'm safe, and moving towards what feels good instead. Generally, the defined spleen has a very strong immune system. So if you are getting sick, it's usually because you sort of ignore the first like 20 signs that something is off. And then by the time you actually do notice or pay attention, something is like really, really off. I have so many stories of this in my life that I'm not gonna go into right now, but they're kind of wild. And so knowing that, I can see, oh yeah, this is like one of those first signs. Let's not ignore that until it gets to something that I need to be hospitalized for. Pay attention to yourself, pay attention to your senses. They're speaking to you, they're guiding you, it's important. The open spleen is said to have a very fluid connection to the space-time continuum, meaning they often do struggle to be on time, or they know that they struggle to be on time, and so they are like hyper vigilant about being on time and are always early. They are still very intuitive people, or can be, but they are going to experience their intuition differently than the defined spleen because it will usually come to them in many different ways. The open spleen often questions if they are intuitive because, again, it's something they experience differently and it's energy that they can pick up and amplify from other people, so they don't have a consistent experience of it. The open spleen can be medically empathic, so they can feel other people's illnesses. So be careful if you have the open spleen. If you're spending a lot of time around people who are sick, you don't want to be taking on their symptoms. The open spleen sometimes have a theme of holding on to things for too long. So, you know, something that used to feel good that doesn't anymore, they just hold on to it because they want it to be back to that like feel good thing. So notice maybe it's people, places, relationships, jobs. Are you holding on to something way past the expiry date? Generally, when you have this open, you have a more sensitive immune system. So I'm not a doctor, this is not medical advice, but it might be interesting for you to look into more alternative methods of healing instead of just like blasting your system with Western medicine. And believe me, Western medicine has saved my life more than once, so I'm very grateful for it. But when someone has an open spleen, it could be useful for them to look into that first. All of the gates on the spleen do have specific fears associated with them, so pay attention to them, whether it's open or not. When you do have it open, you can really amplify the energy and amplify the fears, and it can feel fairly paralyzing. Get to know this, and really the only way out of fear is through recognizing that, you know, it's not real, it's just something that you're feeling. You can move through it. Listen to your strategy and authority. Everything's gonna be okay. The sacral. This is the most sustainable motor that we have. It is all about life force and work energy. Everything that's associated with sex and sexuality, including childbearing, raising children, being able to procure resources and make sure that the children have what they need until they are old enough to go off and survive on their own. It is the energy for work, but most importantly, work through responding. This is going to be an authority for a lot of people, and it works in response. I'll talk about this more in a different video, but it is really important to understand how the sacral works in response. If you have a defined sacral, that is that gut response. It will speak to you in like that or kind of like guttural instant knowing. We are often taught to just go out and make things happen. And if you have this center defined, that is not what you're meant to do. You are meant to respond to the world around you. Now, there's a lot of energy here, and you can push and make things happen. But if you learn how to respond and work with a center, things will flow and your energy will be used in a much better way. It's important when you have this center defined to sleep when you're exhausted. Instead of putting yourself to bed and lying in bed and reading and trying to fall asleep and all of those things, make sure that you use up your energy. So it's like every day you're given like a certain amount of energy. And if you go to bed when you only use up this amount of energy, it's gonna be pretty hard for you to get a good night's sleep. So the idea is to like fully use up your energy, and then you sleep and you're regenerated. And then you fully use up your energy and you sleep and you're regenerated. So that's kind of the cycle of how it works in terms of energy for the sacral. Doing the wrong work or work that you haven't responded to isn't necessarily going to turn off the sacral, but you won't have the same level of energy and like vibrancy that you'll have when it's the work that's right for you that you have responded to. And remember, I use the term work loosely. It can be for raising children, it can be for creative endeavors, it can be a job like we think of work to be, it can be a movement or a philanthropic activity. Work can mean so many different things. The undefined sacral. It's most important for the undefined sacrals to understand that you do not have access to sustainable work and life force energy like the rest of people do. About 70% of people have this defined and 30% have it open. So if you have this open or undefined, you are the minority, and sometimes you are left feeling like you are lazy or there's something wrong with you. That being said, when you have this open, you can take in and amplify the energy, so you can almost have like superhuman, like crazy energy for a little while, but it's not sustainable and it's not something that you can rely on for a long period of time. Often when people with the center open get to their sort of like mid-30s is when they can really start to notice a crash with being able to access this energy. There is a theme with the open sacral of not knowing when enough is enough. That can lead to burnout, exhaustion, all kinds of things that aren't fun. Learning for yourself when you actually need to rest and when you need to take a break is going to be so important for your health, for your happiness, for your success, everything. Because it's difficult for you to use your strategy and authority effectively when you're exhausted. Start paying attention. When is enough enough? When have you watched enough episodes on TV? When have you scrolled enough of Instagram? When have you worked enough hours or spent enough hours in front of your laptop? Begin to notice the kind of beginning signs of when it's enough and create boundaries there. And this is a practice, it really is. It's often something we're so conditioned to just go and go and go and push and push and push. Pay attention, learn when enough is enough, and your life will be better for it, I promise. You also will amplify the energy for sex and sexuality. So depending on what partner you're with, you will amplify that energy if they have a defined sacral. So your experiences with this can often vary quite a bit from partner to partner because the energy is of theirs that you're taking it and amplifying instead of energy that you yourself are bringing. I've been taught, although I don't have children of my own, that when you have the sacral undefined, it can be a little bit trickier to have the energy to raise children. So it's important for you to get help where you can and rest when you need to. You are also not designed to work in the traditional way. So it's important to work in cycles of rest. And it's going to depend a little bit more on what your energy type is. So whether you're a reflector, a projector, or a manifestor, but you're not here to do the 9 to 5, and you are definitely not here to hustle. That was a big eye-opener for me when I learned this. I was exhausted for so long, and learning that I'm actually not meant to be that way, and that even though other people might tell me that like you just need to hustle, you just need to be dedicated, you just need to work harder, that's actually not how my energy works. And things in my business and my life have gone so much better since I've released the idea that I need to be on and working and hustling all the time. Okay, we made it. We are finally at the last center. Are you still with me? It is the center for adrenaline, pressure, drive, and stress. It is also a motor. If you have a defined root, it is a pressure center. So you are likely to be exerting pressure on people who have open roots. You also have this adrenaline energy that kind of pulses on and off. When you have the energy there is just like this drive to use it and to get things done, and you have this surge of energy, and then when it's gone, it's gone. And the way that you experience this does depend on what other motors you have or what this is also connected to, which I will go into a little bit more in another video. Use it when you have it and rest when you don't. When you have an undefined root, it is a center that is under pressure. And the theme with the open root is that you want to hurry up and get things done so you can rest. There's kind of this constant pressure to just finish this next thing, just finish this next thing. But the to-do list is never going to be done. So it's really important here for you to create boundaries. This also is a center that will take pressure in from other people. So if you are in a relationship and if you have someone that has a defined root and an undefined root, and the defined root, which sort of exerts the pressure, and the undefined root receives the pressure, it kind of plays out like this. The defined root will be like, hey, what do you want to have for dinner? And the open root will be like, oh my God, always. Why do I always have to decide what we're having for dinner? Like, I have a job too. I have things to do too. I can't just go to the grocery store and make you dinner every single night. And then the defined root is like, what? I just asked what you wanted for dinner. Like, I can go make it. I can go pick it up. It was just a question. And so if you notice that pattern in your life or in your relationships, it's a good idea to check in and kind of understand what the underlying pressure is. Because if someone is sort of acting that way, it's kind of like, hey, what's going on? What are you actually feeling? What are you thinking I'm saying? What are you thinking my expectations are of you? So be mindful that often they're not actually trying to put pressure on you, but it's just something that you feel when you have an open root. Make sure you head to sortofspiritual.com/centers to get a free guide I made for you so you can easily reference what I've just shared in both part 1 and 2 of the videos. Okay, so that is it. That's all of the centers. I hope you learned something new. I would so appreciate it if you would like the video, if you learned something new, and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.